So, without further ado, Richard, are you there? Sorry, there's too many people now for me to see if you're live and kicking on the call.
Yes,
You are here. Very good.
I'm there, and I'll take a status on live too as well.
Brilliant. So let me just do a very brief introduction. Actually, the first thing I should say is how come it is that NG Traders Europe are hosting a presentation on e-invoicing and VAT in the digital age. For those of you who haven't been before, that may not be obvious. But we believe that one of our data standards, electronic settlement matching, is a superior solution for NG traders for their e-invoicing requirements. We won't be talking about that today, but if you have a look in the regular chat box, you'll see a link to a presentation I did explaining why that's the case. But today's event is given over to Richard. Richard is the CEO of a company called VATCalc. They are a global VAT technology company based in the UK. VATCalc licenses its software to businesses needing to accurately calculate VAT on invoices and e-invoices, and then report in return around the world. The report returns around the world, rather. He originally qualified as an accountant in the Big Four and worked in France, Russia, and Hungary, and Richard, I assume in the UK as well. But he's a nice global coverage of experience. Today's fun fact about Richard is that he originally obtained a degree in English literature, and he welcomes any questions you want to put in the Q&A on observations about comparative literature for the period 1780 to 1850. So as well as VAT, you can liven up the chat by asking him questions on that topic. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Richard Asquith. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Stuart. Even my mother's not that generous about me, so I do appreciate those nice words. Yes, and in terms of e-invoicing, why on earth are you sitting here sacrificing the next 30 minutes or so to listening to a VAT person? Basically, it's because the tax authorities are undertaking a coup d'etat of your invoices. And I'm sure you're all aware, there's this huge problem we have with the national and international VAT regimes, in that there's a massive loophole, particularly around cross-border trade, what a lot of you are involved, which is enabling billions to go missing of VAT. And the governments around, tax authorities around the world, always pressed for VAT, for extra revenues, but now particularly pinched with slowdown in economies. So they've, after trying lots of different things and getting those wrong, they're going to try a new thing, which is definitely not going to go wrong, which is automation of invoice reporting. So nobody foresees any problems with technology. And this is around electronic invoicing. So it affects literally every company. I was going to say every company that's tax registered, but it even goes beyond them. Any company or entrepreneur selling goods or services, they are going to have to be issuing, and at the very least, they'll have to be able to receive electronic invoice. And it's spreading around the world, depending on who you ask or what chart or what tedious PowerPoint presentation on e-invoicing you're sitting through. This one accepted, obviously. It's something like 80 mandates in existence at the moment around the world, and it will certainly be well over 100 shortly. So what I'm going to do today then is, because I give this presentation, or I present it to you, rather, I should say, because God forbid that I repeat myself on something as important as this. Earlier this year, I think it was April time. So it's partly an update on what's been happening since. It's there's a lot going on. 2026 is a really big year, and then the next big year after that is 2030. So to update you on what's going on, what's coming on in the EU, and a bit of a refresher on some of the concepts, and then to look at a few countries in particular that I was pre-warned you'd be interested in, and just see what their regimes and see what the differences are. And at the very least, it gives us a wonderful opportunity to be very wise and sneeringly look at the attempts of national governments to try and inject their way into your businesses and doing a ham-fisted job of it. So I will crack on then. I have a presentation. I think it will take me about 25, 30 minutes. And so if I just share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen if I just put it into presenter mode. Can someone give me a nod? Are you happy? Can you see?
All good.
Great. Okay. So we're going to look, as I said, as I mentioned, we're going to give you an update and focus in on a few countries around what's going on in e-invoicing. We focused off with ViDA, VAT in the digital age. And as I'll touch on in a moment, VAT in the digital age is an EU initiative to modernize the VAT regime, and e-invoicing, e-reporting is one of the central pillars of that. But as I said, it does provide us, or what provides us really interesting context is what's going on nationally. So I'll certainly do that. That said, it's a very serious subject, which I would never take lightheartedly. So on that basis, I'm going to devote the next minute and a half to this to get you in the mood.
July 2030. VAT in the digital age is coming. Accounts payables braces for the onslaught of e-invoices in 27 country formats. But all the CFO would approve is a new spreadsheet. And then the supplier e-invoices uploaded. Millions of them. Manual validation of e-invoices in just 5 days was always doomed to delayed payments and interrupted deliveries. So companies turned to training staff with AI.
I know people.
Show me.
The VAT on this invoice looks like an illegal tariff.
He's hallucinating again and rejecting all invoices. It's chaos for the supply chain. Oh dear, perhaps AI is not the chosen one for e-invoicing. Where's my Excel?
Right. I hopefully that gave you a slightly light-hearted warm up to what we'll be covering today. I do feel sorry for the people who came in halfway through, because they've probably tuned out now, thinking they'd come onto some illegal Matrix streaming film. But it does give you, in all seriousness, it does give you a feeling of what to be warned about. That this live reporting and controlling and having to report rather to the tax authorities in real time your transactions, and what implications that's going to have on you managing your well-honed supply chains and transactions reportings. Right. So firstly, let's go to ViDA now. ViDA, as I mentioned, is three pillars. The one we're going to focus on is pillar one, which only the EU would know how to do this. Somehow the pillar that's coming last is the pillar that's numbered number one. Just very briefly, though, the other two pillars, platform economy, that's all about imposing VAT on ride sharing. So things like Uber and Bolt, imposing VAT obligations, and home sharing, so Airbnb. And then pillar three, which I spent a bit of time last time talking about. I won't spend much time today talking about. Pillar 3 is about return. That's the concept of a single VAT return to report all of your VAT orders. So rather than having 10, 20 VAT returns if you're holding stocks, or in your case, you're trading energy across goods, because for VAT, we treat that as goods. And I know a lot of energy suppliers have multiple VAT registrations. They're extending OS out to much more business cases, and that comes in July 2028. But let's get back to digital reporting, which is the e-invoicing and e-reporting, digitalization. It's a gradual shift away from the periodic VAT returns that we're all accustomed to. So you send out your invoices, the VAT may be right or it may not be right. But then come the end of the month or the end of the quarter, your poor finance department, or or God forbid, you've got VAT executives, they spend weeks and weeks scrambling around trying to get the VAT right on the invoices, correcting them, and then they submit the return. We're going to live reporting now on that. So a couple of things that just to update you on the progress on pillar 1. So it was approved in March, came into effect in April. So the first major change that meant was that, and you'll see this in a minute, governments are now free. They no longer need the permission of the European Commission at the domestic level, so domestic transactions, so German to German or French to French supplies. They're free to introduce their own domestic versions of that, but if they're doing it today, then it must replicate ViDA. The ViDA proposals, and you'll see what I mean as I get into the details of both the ViDA design and the national designs that are coming in between now and the introduction of ViDA in 2030, and some other minor changes as well. We're now working on the implementation papers and the regulations. So there, as you can imagine, they're the laws and the guidance, the supplementary guidance around how all this is going to be introduced, and it's where we iron out all of the fiddly use cases, how it fits in with other mechanisms within the EU VAT regime. So lots of workshops going on there. PEPL, I won't spend a lot of time on PEPL because I think most of you will be aware with it, but very, very briefly, the PEPL network was originally established by the EU, and it is the PEPL network is a platform run by the organization called PEPL, confusingly, and it's all about promoting common standards for the exchange of documentation within businesses and between businesses. So it can be all kinds of documentation, purchase documentation, not just e-invoices. And the PEPL network is an infrastructure, a network where businesses can link together across borders and exchange documents, but e-invoices. And governments are increasingly, you will see this in a minute, increasingly adopting PEPL as their preferred way for businesses locally to exchange invoices. Anyway, there is a pilot going on right now, should complete at the end of this year. So we're all watching that because that will help us inform the details of what we all need to do to prepare for ViDA. There is, I think I've got, no, I dropped it. I did have a separate slide on this, so good news is you've been spared that one. EN 16931 is not just an acronym that you casually use in cocktail parties to show how clever you are, but it also is a very interesting standard that the EU has had for years around e-invoicing, but only for B2G. We just saw released just over a month ago an updated version of that for B2B. So again, that sets up all the structures, the schemas, the semantics, if you're familiar with all of this, that you can use for e-invoicing. So it's something, if you're deeply involved in this, you should understand. Okay, and then lastly, more around the infrastructure. There's designs for the introduction of all the processes and architecture to manage all of what you're about to see is coming with ViDA. Okay, So now we'll go to the design or the requirements of ViDA. I think I did present this to you last time we met. It hasn't changed much, but what I'm going to try and do here is give you an idea of the complexity of what's coming for July 2030. And this affects, just to clarify, this affects what we call affectionately within EU VAT circles, intra-community supplies. Intra-community supplies are generally B2B transactions across intra-EU borders. So France to Italy, Romania to Greece. Anything outside, and it's just the simplistic way to think about it, it's imports and exports between businesses within the EU borders, intra-community. So anything that goes outside of the EU, so France to the US, is not an intra-community supply, so is not within the mandate here. Okay, so first of all, what's going to be required of the seller is that they're going to have to produce an electronic invoice in accordance with EN 16931 there. And they are going to have to issue that. They'll issue it either within an API-enabled accounting software, or they might have to hire a software provider. So to put some color on that, most of the software companies, so whether you're an enterprise SAP or you're right down to a small business using Sage or Xero, they're all gearing up for this now and starting to build in e-invoicing into their software. So that will be a reassuringly expensive add-on for you all to buy. And the good news is, I mean, that's the optimum way to do this, is because if you think about it, an ERP without e-invoicing would be ridiculous. You know, you can imagine SAP or JD Edwards explaining to you that you can't send out your invoice for payment, possibly the most important process within a finance department, through their system. So the good news is, and that I think that's from the last time we spoke, that's the real progress that I see. The ERPs are getting their acts together. But alternatively, if you're doing cross-border or there's complexities to your business, then you would use a service provider. You might use someone like Pagero or Basware, Edacom, and there's lots of other smaller ones. Just as a side comment, what is good is prices on this are collapsing. There's a lot of new entrants coming onto the market. So that's a positive step. So you produce your e-invoice, and then you must exchange it with your customer, your buyer. And that must be done within 10 days. I'm going to come back to this point because it's the next slide, possibly the most important lesson that I would want, or thing that I would want to leave you with today, that time frame. And they will receive it, and this is being clarified, but it's going to be through it could be through a PEPL network, or it could be through an alternative mechanism that you can design. But generally, it's got to follow E16931. Okay, so the buyer receives it through their software or their service provider. So that's the exchange of the e-invoice between businesses. There's no government involvement, direct government involvement at this point. The second step, which we call e-reporting, is how do you tell the tax authorities this? And this is where this slide does get very complicated. So the first step is the supplier or their e-invoice service provider must notify the tax authorities within 10 days. And then the tax authorities on the buyer side may insist, so it's optional, that's why there's a dotted line here, they may insist that the buyer has to similarly notify their domestic tax authority that they've received a sales invoice. Okay, so the invoice gets reported potentially twice. Now, what's to fear about that is the word potentially, because you've got to understand if you're a receiver of an electronic invoice, and it could be in another EU country, you might have to report that purchase in your ledger to your tax authority. Okay. Then the next step from that is that information goes into this central VIS, and That's a database that the European Commission, and that will hold all of the information. And this is the end game for the tax authorities. Through this, through central V's, they'll be able to hopefully identify the VAT fraud that they're trying to eliminate. Okay, and just lastly on this slide, I know it's a lot to take in. You'll see we number this slide. It's got numbers at different points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we would call this in the jargon, I'm sure you're familiar, we would call this a five corner model. And you see why. There's 5 different parties. I see some. When I first did this, I called it a 6 corner model because, strictly speaking, there's 2 different tax authorities, and you could even call it a 7. So there's a real weaponization of these models. And when you see slides like this, you'll see people saying 4 corner, 5 corner, 6 and 7 corner model. But just so as long as you're familiar with the concept, because you're going to see some other slides that do this. Okay, now that trust me, that was the very, very painful slide. So I thought I'd get that one out of the way first. Now this is a really interesting slide. I promised you I'd take you through that timing. It's super, super important that you understand this if you're involved. What's changing? Remember we said 10 days reporting on your sales e-invoice and 5 days reporting of your receipt of a purchase invoice. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is show how it works today. So today, if you receive goods or services, sorry, if you're selling goods or services, forgive me, on the 15th of July, then your time limit required to report that invoice through an ESL report, which is supplementary to your VAT return, and the invoice must have gone out by the 15th of the following month. So you've got, what, 30 days there. And obviously, if the supply was earlier in July, then it would be 40, so potentially up to 45 days of sending out the invoice. So what's changed? There you go. Instead of 15 in our example, 30 in our example, but potentially 45, you've only now got 10 days. And this is the worry for businesses. And this is what I've devoted my life career to, given that comparative literature didn't work out in the way that my lying A-level teacher promised me, but that's a different story and a different rabbit hole. This is the challenge that everyone's facing. They've got to get their VAT right within this period. Do you remember I said today we have this luxury of waiting for month end, and your finance or VAT people got plenty of time to sort out their problems with their invoicing. That's now evaporated, that time limit. Okay. By the way, that slide took me forever to get right. Just, you know, a round of applause wouldn't hurt. Now, let's get down to the country level. Now that we understand ViDA, just to update you on what's going on the country level. This slide, those of you that were here last time, earlier this year in the hopeful optimism of spring, this is what I showed you. And this obviously is a timeline of all the different mandates for domestic transactions. So we've just done ViDA, which, as you remember, was about intra-community or cross-border VAT, mandatory e-invoicing and mandatory e-reporting to the tax authorities in 2030, July 2030. This is what countries are doing at the domestic level. Very simplistically, the top part of the chart is Europe, and below that is rest of the world. And as you can see there, last I think it was April we met. There's a lot scheduled, and that's after many delays. Now, here's a quick fun drum roll moment when I show you what's changed. There you go. For those of you not eagle-eyed and couldn't remember all the changes, I'll just quickly go through them and add any local cover. We are going to go into three or four of these countries in a bit more detail in a second. So what has changed? Greece has appeared So I'm going to try and do the top row first. Greece has appeared with shockingly little notice, 3 or 4 months, breaking a record that we all thought would stand for a long time, which was Romania, who gave the world, I think, 9 months notice. In fairness to Greece, that's already within an e-reporting system called ViDA. They've just completed their pilot in the past few days, and I believe it's all go for them. So no delay there. Latvia appeared, and they've got a nice voluntary regime lined up. That's for 2028. One of the big pieces of news was Ireland has declared. So you see Ireland has appeared there towards the end of 2028. They've got Ireland's got 2 phases over a 12-month period. They're first doing exchange of e-invoicing around PEPL around 16931, and then they're doing e-reporting, which is reporting to the revenue, the Irish tax authorities, and that's from 2029, I believe. There's a lot of flexibility about that. Ireland are a model of how to do this now, much more organized, much bigger time span, much more consultation, much more inclusion of the accounting packages and the ERP publishers. And that's key to success. So Ireland definitely deserves a round of applause in terms of its design so far. Another one that got added, albeit with a question mark, is Netherlands. And under Netherlands, if we were to do this slide again in 6 months' time, and you were happy to come along again, that would balloon, that box there over there on the right. We'd see lots of the sort of Scandinavian countries, I think, the countries that aren't quite committed or sure whether they want to introduce domestic reporting. And what we expect is, and that's part of the reason why we put it in that far right box, is it will appear at the same time as ViDA. A kind of a big bang, which is tidy, but it's a lot for everybody to take in, I would say about that. Then quickly on the rest of the world, lots of stories of delays. Chief in delay commander is definitely Philippines. Every time we update this slide, Philippines slips off a few months. That's moved off to 2026. Same with UAE. The Gulf have been because it's also, let me think, it's Oman as well, have declared, and I think they're somewhere on our chart. Yeah, there they are, 2026. They're very well organized, but they have nevertheless included some delays, and Belize and Angola are the same. Okay. And I will now go to the next slide. Oh, so I fibbed. I thought I hadn't got a slide about 16931, but it's obviously so important that I did leave it in. So apologies. So very, very briefly, I've explained what the concept is. It's just been modernized now. So there's lots of additions in there around the syntax and UBL. You'll be able to include lots of extra information that businesses need that B2G didn't need. So things like credit notes and FX differences, IBAN numbers, bank payment numbers. That's a good point. What has survived in all of the debates, both within ViDA and on the domestic level, is you're going to need to include bank payment details within your reporting. So lots of other inclusions there now. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, because I'm going to get seasick if that slide keeps moving around like that. Okay, quick look at some of the countries, what they're up to, and we're going to explain their models because, well, firstly, we're going to do 3 countries that are going next year, 2026, which is our first big bang before. It's kind of the warm-up act, if you like, the warm-up comedian for 2030, the ViDA one. So Belgium is the pin-up, I would say, of the e-invoicing, e-reporting world. They've done it really, really sensibly. That's 1st of January, and they've broken it into 2, a bit like Ireland is doing, but Belgium's gap is a bit broader. So firstly, 1st of January, all Belgian businesses must be registered now with PEPL, the PEPL network. Remember, I was explaining that. That's the EU-backed, originally EU-backed, but now increasingly global network where you can log on, you can get registered, or you can find an agent who will register on your behalf. And that's how you submit via an API your sales invoices to send on to your customers. And then PEPL really takes care of the transformation of the data and making sure it's in a format that's acceptable to your customer or their agent. And then e-reporting only then comes 2 years later. There's lots of guidance and support being provided by Belgium. I should say, and I'll give you an address at the end. All of the stuff we covered here, we keep up on our website at VATCalc, vatcalc.com. So it's really easy to see any of the details and drill down into anything I'm mentioning here. Quickly on the Belgium model. So you remember I talked about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 corner models. Belgium is taking 2 steps to go to a 5 corner model. So the first stage is, as we already talked about, this is similar to ViDA for the exchange of EN16931 invoices. You can use a PEPL network. You don't have to use a PEPL network. The PEPL network you can opt out as long as your customer, your buyer agrees, and that's how you exchange the invoice. So this is 2026. And this is where we get the term 4 corner. You see how it works, 1, 2, 3, 4. What Belgium then does is in 2 years later, 2028, it introduces the 5th corner, which is the near real-time reporting to the Belgian tax authorities. So that's a really good, that's what we expect to see in the future. ViDA compliant, not too invasive, doesn't inject the government in between the tax authorities and business, whereas Poland does. Poland's the bad boy of e-invoicing. I say bad boy, there's a lot of Polands, let me tell you that. So Poland designed their system a few years ago, pre-ViDA design. So in Poland, the big headline on Poland is it does require you to report the transaction to the tax authorities. So Poland goes live in February the 1st of next year for large taxpayers, as you see there, and then all other taxpayers are a couple of months later. So we're right in the midst of testing environments, betas, free apps now becoming available, lots of paperwork. The Poles, in fairness to them, much better at communicating than they were a few years ago when they first tried and missed their own deadline. So aside from the design, I think it has been it's much better organized than it was. Okay. Quick look at how it's designed. So let's look at our model. So KSEF, that's the acronym that we use for the Polish tax authorities. So you have to be able to send your invoice to the Polish KSEF standard, so not EN16931. The Poles have created their own standard, and there you see what happens. This is we call this in the industry pre-clearance, meaning you've got to notify the government first before you can send on the your invoice to your customer. So government in the middle, and you can see there you've got to be able to send your KSEF invoice data to the government-backed platform. That gets verified and you get a return to it. The customer can go through the platform and retrieve their invoice and then post it to their ledger. So long in the tooth experts on e-invoicing around Europe, this is very much like the Italian model, SDI, similar to that. Really. And one of the things that ViDA did, and I touched on this, ViDA has effectively banned any more of these, no more of these. Countries that have already introduced this, and Poland's able to continue because it was in flight by the time ViDA was approved. So countries like Poland, and quite a long list actually, Poland, Italy, Hungary, Spain, Greece, I think technically Bulgaria. They haven't launched theirs, but they got approval for a pre-clearance model. They will be allowed to sustain this model until January 2035. So if you think about it, come 1st of July 2030, we could have you could have three layers of reporting. You will have ViDA for the intra-community supply. You will have your domestic model, which is like Belgium. It's through PEPOL, it's e-invoicing exchange. You might have to do e-reporting. And then you'll have this third model if you're in a country which has one of these more restrictive models. So a lot to manage, and that's the irony of a lot of things in the EU. In often trying to harmonize and standardize, we just create different types of differences and friction. Okay. Right. Skimming along, I've just give you a time check. Yeah, we're probably going to finish, or I'm going to finish my bit at in another 10 minutes or so. Okay, France. Let's look at France. Vive la différence. See, not just e-invoicing and English comparative literature. I can also butcher many foreign languages too. No end to my skill set. France is doing it the French way, as France always does. So next year in September, they're introducing a slightly halfway house. I'll go through that. Yeah, I've got a slide to explain their model. It's effectively a five corner, but there's some nuances to it. And this is the first nuance, and this is the annoying one as far as French taxpayers are concerned, is to send your e-invoice to your customer, your B2B customer for your domestic supply of goods or services. You can't do it directly. So, for example, through an API connected from your SAP or your NetSuite software to your tax authorities. You must appoint an approved. They're called approved platforms, APs. I think it's pronounced platform 𝐞𝐈𝐧𝐯, something like that. Agree. You must appoint one of those. And it's their responsibility to accept your data, to transform it, and then to forward it via PEPOL network. So France has adopted PEPOL. I think that's new news since we last spoke. And then that has to go to your buyer's approved platform as well. And then the second point is then the approved platforms have to submit that data on your behalf to DG FIP, the tax authorities there. So it's a five-corner model, like Belgium. However, the things that's got everyone riled up is the enforced use of an agent, and people call it in France. You see them calling it the invoice tax, I think they call it. The good news is the prices has collapsed. I think in terms of timing, France, because France has delayed several times, all these countries have delayed multiple times. The French insist there will be no delay, which is ironic because in the legislation, it literally has a clause that enables them to delay. There's actually a clause that says, if necessary, we can delay by a further 3 months. So there could be a potential delay to December, but beyond that, I doubt it. French are doing a very good job, I think, at the moment of communicating, and there's lots of dialogue going on there. I suppose the slight problem is I don't know how many taxpayers there are in France. I would guess VAT registered companies. I'd guess over 1 million, something like that, and there are supplier approved platforms. I think the last time I saw, there might be 140, something like that. So I'll let cleverer people than me figure out what 140 divided into 1 million is, but that's not a lot of coverage. Okay, so that could be a bottleneck. Right, that's France. one thing, and always keep an eye out for this, there may be soft launch periods where there's some forgiveness. This is a very new piece of news that came out. The National Assembly is pushing for a soft launch grace period there of 2 years. No penalties, no effect. Maintain your right to deduct VAT as long as you've made your best efforts. I'm not sure what best efforts means, because Belgium has also done the same. I don't think you showing up to this type of presentation counts as best efforts, but let's see. Then lastly, Germany. Sorry, this is a slightly ugly slide, but it's quite a good slide explaining the complexities of Germany. They're going through this phase. Germany, theoretically, I think, is the easiest regime to comply with from a company's point of view. So what happened was they went from today, which is obviously 2024, to on the 1st of January this year, businesses must be able to receive e-invoices to the standards you see there. And in effect, what that meant was, if you wanted to, you could just set up an email account where your suppliers could send their sales invoices to. The first big bang for Germany is 2027. So you've got a year and a half now of, or less than a year and a half, a year and 12 months, a year and 13 months, where, as you see there, you can't use unstructured PDF e-invoices any further. And there's a slight allowance there for smaller businesses, under 800,000 euros turnover. So 1st of January 2027 there. Okay, a lot of grumblings from Germany. Germans don't like automating, and obviously there's loads of caveats around that. Forgive me for just insulting 80 million people there, but they're the most resistant that I see of all the countries. So there's a lot of talk of delay there, but there's always talk of delay. So perhaps we should overlook it. But as I say, a relatively simple one to comply with, which is, I think, positive, I'd say, about this design. Okay, just almost finished. Quick word about the UK, because I understand there's quite a lot of UK people. The budget, which is 26th of November, so a couple of weeks away. You'll be watching out for income tax rises, but much more excitingly, we expect to see announcement of what the UK EU mandates. UK e-invoicing mandate. Here's my guess. Okay, I think it'll look a bit like Belgium. So we will have the first 4 corners, and the UK HMRC and Treasury, they're talking about putting the pressure on the software providers to do the hard work for you. So we'll have some sort of PEPL based. First question I'd have over this is whether it would be mandatory, because there is some talk that the government won't make it mandatory. The government's had their fingers burnt with things like MTD on mandating. And then the second question I have, are we going to have a 5th corner? Will there be real-time reporting to HMRC? So what we may end up compromising, and this is my third question, is timing. What you might see, a bit like Ireland, a bit like Belgium, is HMRC go for the 4 corner, the top half first. So they standardize the exchange of invoices, electronic invoices between businesses, but then they only go for the direct reporting maybe 2 years later. So broadly, best guess, where are we, 2025? The earliest you could do 4 corner is, I would say, 3 years. So 2029 for the top end, maybe 2030 for corner 5, something like that. Okay. Oh, I'd forgotten about this. We had this in the last presentation. Some tidy bit of reporting ESLs will be removed. That's one of the benefits. Okay, just very lastly, because I've gone over slightly over time, where we are involved at VATCalc, just a cheap advert, if you like, is we get involved in, before you send out your invoice and when you receive your invoice, you've got that 10-day period, and 5-day period with ViDA, and sometimes the period is shorter with domestic regimes, is we get involved in the calculation of the VAT or the validation, particularly for purchase invoices. So we support a lot of the e-invoicing companies who don't know about VAT. So our technology is injected into your accounting system or into their e-invoicing system to make sure the VAT is correct. Okay, right, you deserve a bit of light relief. So to get you in the mood for the UK, another quick short. Yeah, I know. No time to file. That's a terrible pun. But honestly, you try and do this all the time and come up with clever VAT funds. So that's it. Thanks very much for listening into all of that. I'll hand back to Stuart.
Richard, thank you. Entertaining as always. Could I ask if anybody on the call has any questions, please could you post those on the Q&A button that's up the top. Whilst folk are thinking about that, please use this opportunity to ask Richard questions. Richard, you didn't mention Switzerland. I know there are a few folk on the call from Swiss organisations, and there's quite a lot of energy trading organisations based in Switzerland. What are the Swiss up to?
Wait and see, as always, with Switzerland. You can guarantee the Swiss will wait for the EU to mess up a new regime, try it out, make the mistakes, and then quietly, immodestly copy. So I haven't heard. The earliest I think it would be 2030, but I think that's too early. Maybe 2032, something like that. Just following, the pattern of behaviour that Switzerland has around this. Yeah, they're very, very behind on tax automation compared to the EU. So no panic there, I don't think.
Got you. Thank you. So let me just check the Q&A. I can't see any there. Can I just check on the chat, see if any have gone in there as well? That's looking like not. So rather than torture the audience, I'm going to do a couple of things. The first, Richard, is thank you for the excellent and amusing presentation.
Sorry to interrupt. There is a question about Spain. Spain's a good one, actually.
Sorry.
Yeah. Spain could have deserved a slide. I have to think this through, talk and think at the same time, which is not a recipe success with me. So Spain there are three paths for Spain in electronic invoicing. There's the existing near real-time reporting, which is a bit like Hungary, SII, and that's been around for, I don't know, 6-7 years, something like that. So that's where it's like e-reporting, and they want to replace that. And there's two replacements. So path 2 is called VeriFactu. and I probably butchered that. And that comes in 1st of January 2026, and that's for very, very small businesses. So I'm very, very confident there is no one on this call who would be eligible for VeriFacto, and that's a simplified measure for reporting. But then, in terms of, I think is it Dennis asking this question? We don't know. When is Spain going to introduce their e-invoicing? They I think it was on my chart as 2027. Yeah, it was on 2027. That I would now change to 2028 as my best guess. And the only reason, the reason I put a date on it is because they've talked a lot about it, the Spanish, and they've said we will give you 12 months notice once we make the announcement, a minimum of 12 months. So given that we're into the 2025, then it's at least 12 months, realistically, 18 months, more probably 24 months. So that's why I say 2028. The thing about the Spanish is the Spanish, the way they communicate their tax authorities is very unlike the others. The others tend to make a lot of noise, tend to do a lot of consultations. You can hear it coming. You can hear the drum beats. Spain, just one day, they'll just pop it like that. They'll just say, here you go, it's coming in. We didn't talk to you. We're not listening. Good luck. It's very much that approach. So they're a fun example of how e-invoicing can pop on us. So 2028 is the earliest, in short. Does that help?
Sounds like it did. I was going to ask Dennis, sorry, I was on mute, whether Dennis wanted to follow up. Dennis, was there any further follow-up on that question? Lovely, thank you very much. And lastly, any further questions before I round off the call? Okay, so it just leaves me to a few things. First is to say a huge thank you to Richard for giving up time and entertaining us on what is potentially quite a dry topic for today. Richard, if folk want to get in contact with you, how do they find you?
Well, I'm available for dinner parties and social gatherings to talk about e-invoicing. I've just put my I've put my email in the chat. I certainly I'll send you and the team and etc. I'll send you a PDF of the presentation minus the videos. And you can share that out. And there's an email. There was an email, but I took the screen down. That email was there as well. Oh yeah, and Anka's put the website on. If you are keen about that, go there. There's a section called, I think it's called info. There's a drop down there, and there's loads of, and it's kept bang up to date stuff about e-invoicing.
Perfect. So thank you very much. I'd encourage people to do that. A couple of little adverts for NG Traders Europe and the Operations Committee then. The first thing to say is for those of you that do currently use electronic settlement matching, that data standard of ours has been EN 16931 compliant since around about April this year, and we are committed to keeping that in step. And we work closely with PEPL. So if you're from a jurisdiction that's using PEPL, you could be reassured that we are working with them to track the various changes in the market. The other thing I would say is even if you're not using electronic settlement matching, it can be helpful just to attend the operations committee or do the working group on e-invoicing, because you can understand through those two different groups any issues that are arising specifically for our industry that arise from this legislation. So, for instance, how your counterparts are dealing with negative prices, which aren't a thing in 16931. We are trying to move that forward, but right now you can't have negative prices in the standards. And similarly, there are a bunch of units of measures that are not catered for by the standard. So even if you're not going to use our data standard, which obviously I'd encourage you to do. It can be helpful to attend those forums just to understand what's really going on in implementing e-invoicing within the energy trading world. So I think that brings us nicely to 2 o'clock. So thank you again to Richard, and thank you to everybody for attending today. The call is recorded and will be available on YouTube shortly on the Energy Traders Europe channel, and we'll be making Richard's presentation available within that timetable too. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thanks all. Bye.